Good morning. It's good to see everyone here this morning. Those watching online, we are glad that you are here as well. Here in this community of faith at Hinsdale Fil-am Church, we truly want to be and are a source to help equip you with tools and resources so that you can become the best version that God created you to be. And to that end, we started this teaching series 3 weeks ago. What's the teaching series entitled? It is entitled Anchored, Building Character to Thrive in Anxiety. Did you get this invitation card? You have the invitation card. It has the entire teaching series on the back. And notice that this is not just a schedule to put on your refrigerator. It is also a card, an invitation card to invite a friend, a neighbor, maybe an enemy, to journey with you to learn how to build character to thrive in anxiety. You know, I mentioned this a few weeks ago. We have a very bold goal on December 20, Christmas weekend. We plan to worship in another place and welcome 600 people. That's about 3 times our attendance. And I shared this last week. There was a sermon that I heard where one preacher said that the habits in the ordinary will be our habits in the extraordinary. So the habits that I practice in the ordinary will be the practice that I will have in the extraordinary. And so my encouragement to you is if you have been touched and you are continuing to be blessed by these teachings, I would invite you to join me in inviting other people. This is not meant for ourselves, but meant to share with other people. Today's topic, 3 weeks ago, the first topic that we covered was living well in an anxious world. We are talking about this topic because we are living in anxious times. And then last week, we talked about how to shine when the world is loud. And today's topic is a topic that I know that is going to resonate with many of you, and especially me. And you know what it's called? Rise above anger. How do we rise above anger? Look, you don't have to look very far to know that anger is a real thing. We are seeing it everywhere. Charlie Kirk's name is still floating around in the news. And everywhere you go, there's always this commentary and this person on this side of the political aisle that's barking, angry at the other side, right? This side says, I can't stand the left, angry at them. And then the left says, I can't stand the right? And then if you look at what happened to Jimmy Kimmel, did you see what happened to Jimmy Kimmel, talk show host this week? Indefinitely suspended. Why? We can't stand what he said. Anger, 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 anger. Everywhere we turn, everyone is angry. I'm innocently driving on Ogden Avenue, and because I'm going slow, the guy behind me is driving and trying to cut me off, and he is angry. I don't know what he's angry about. He's just angry to get 2 minutes earlier to work, right? Anger is everywhere, and you don't have to raise your hand, and please don't. But maybe there are some people who experienced anger in your household inside the 4 walls of your home this week. And maybe you were a recipient of that anger, or perhaps you were also the villain of that anger or the giver of that anger. What is anger anyway? Is it bad to feel anger? Ramsey did a great job. The feeling of anger is not a bad thing. It is a trigger. The dictionary defines anger as a discomfort, as a feeling of displeasure and contempt at something or at someone. Anger is not a bad thing, right? Because it's a trigger that causes us to either fly. Have you heard of flight? Flight? What's the other one? Fight or freeze, right? And have you heard of this one? I've heard this from Alison Cook in her amazing book. I forgot the title of the book. She called it fawning. Do you know what fawning is? So when you have a trigger and you have this feeling of anger, you can either, put your Manny Pacquiao gloves on and box that guy or that person, fight, or you could flight, you could run away when you're scared, right? Or you could freeze, and the fourth one she says is fawn. And fawn is another way of saying I become a doormat. So I just kind of, fawn and whatever you say is true and you don't really stand up for what you really believe. The reality is that all of us this week, this last month, have internally and emotionally experienced anger. And if we have to be honest, if we look ourselves in the mirror and face our true selves, what we really see is not a pretty sight. It's not. It is not a pretty sight. And so what we're trying to do in this teaching series is to equip you with tools and resources so that you can become the best version that God created you to be. Last night, I was speaking at my alma mater at Pioneer Memorial Church for a Friday night worship program. There were hundreds of students there. And you know what the title of the teaching series was? Real life, real God. And I shared last night that for me, God isn't real unless he intersects with my real life. Jesus' name is Emmanuel. And do you know what the word Emmanuel means? It means God with us. That means that the Word, Jesus, became flesh like us. So if this faith of this belief in God and Jesus or whatever you believe doesn't actually intersect with your life, then I wonder if what I really believe is real. And so our hope is that you will receive some real resources today and some inspiration. And what we're going to try to answer today is answer the question, how do I rise above anger? How do we rise above anger? And I'll give you a clue. It doesn't start on the outside. It doesn't start with our actions. It starts somewhere else. I was about 16 or 17 years old. And I was driving in my mom's car. It was a nice Toyota 4Runner 1998 limited edition. It was green. I remember those details. Beautiful, pristine, and clean. And I won't mention the person, but there was a family member sitting next to me, okay? And we just left our house to go hang out with some friends. And we were having a great time. It was summer. It was hot. The breeze was coming through. And we even had the sunroof open. And as we were talking, the person on my right in the passenger side was sitting, talking, have a grand old time. And all of a sudden, something fell from the sky. I said, "What is that?" "Bird dung." Look, have you ever had bird dung fall on you from the sky? So I felt for that person on my right. She was irate. She was upset. What? And she's a clean freak, okay? Like, what? What? There's bird dung on my arm, right? She was angry, right? Extreme contempt and extreme displeasure. "I can't believe you, bird," right? She was so upset. Dung on my arm. And honestly, I wanted to feel angry too, but inside I was... Come on, you all know. You're not the only one who has laughed at someone else's discomfort, right? I was like, I can't believe that dung fell out of the sky and landed on this person's arm. But I also felt then anger, because I also am a clean freak. Any other clean freaks in here? All right? Dung. That is what anger is. It makes you and it makes me feel like dung. Bird dung. So how do we get rid of this angry dung feeling in our souls? Well, Jesus gives us a clue. He gives us a clue in Matthew. Let's go to the book of Matthew. If you have a Bible here, Matthew chapter 5, which is this part of this Sermon on the Mount. If you have a Bible, feel free to turn to Matthew chapter 5, beginning with verse 21. If you didn't bring a Bible, there's one in the pew in front of you. If you don't have that, you can look it up on your phone or on your tablet. And this passage is also in the bulletin that you received on the backside. So Matthew chapter 5, and we will be in verses 21 through 25, okay? So Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 and 25. Remember, we're trying to ask the question, how do I rise above anger? And did you know, Jesus didn't specifically talk about dung, but he did give some words that help us deal with that dung feeling, that anger that you and I experience and sometimes hold on to that ends up destroying us. Look what Jesus said in chapter 5, verse 21. He said, "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment.'" Now, what is Jesus saying here? Do you know what he's quoting from? When he says to the people, "You shall not murder, anyone who murders will be subject to judgment," he's referring to the 10 commandments, especially the 6th commandment that said, "You shall not kill," or "You shall not murder." And what is murder? It is the premeditated act of taking someone's life. So Jesus is saying, look, in the Old Testament, God said, we said, right? I said, the 10 Commandments says, "You shall not murder," right? And anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. You will be judged if you take someone else's life. But notice what Jesus does. He says that the dung action has a deeper dimension to life. And this is what's so brilliant about Jesus and why Jesus and his teachings are so relevant for 2025. I wish that the right and the left, politically, religiously, socially in our country, would just listen to the words of Jesus. I think that we would be better off if we would follow the words of Jesus. He says here in verse 22, "But I tell you that anyone who is angry," what word is that? Anyone who feels like dung, and anyone who wants to throw dung at their opponent, anyone who is angry, he says, notice what he says, with a brother or a sister. And by the way, when he says brother or sister, he's not just talking about the outside of the person outside of the faith. He's talking about the brothers and sisters within the body of faith. Which, by the way, happens in every community of faith. I've seen it in every single community of faith and church that I've been a part of, and this church is no exception. It's just that in the Filipino culture, we do a better job of hiding that because we don't like to confront people directly. And what happens is that we allow the wrong that someone has done to me to actually fester as I tell other people. And then I get really upset. The other person get upset. And what happens? You end up going to another church or to another community of faith because we're not brave enough and courageous enough to actually confront and to talk about the issues. And Jesus says here, 22, "But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment too." So it's more than just the behavior of throwing dung. There's a deeper dimension to anger. There's an internal dimension. Can you say the word internal with me? Or internal? Internal. He says anyone who says to a brother or sister, "Raka," is answerable to the court. That's another way of saying, "You fool," or "You're stupid." That's what he's saying. Anyone who says that. He says, and anyone who says, "You fool," will be in danger of the fire of hell. What is Jesus saying here? Look, he's not saying that if you say those words that you are going to be judged. What he's saying is, the words that you share, the disrespect, the dung that you throw with either your fist or your words is actually revealing something deeper about your character. He's saying, you all think that you're going to control your anger by changing your behavior or your actions. But Jesus drives it home and he says, you know what murder is? It's not the action, but it is the motivation behind that action that drives you to throw dung. Are you guys catching what I'm laying down here? So, in other words, if I feel dung, and I don't deal with that dung, that anger, I can't believe he did that or said that or she did that or my child did that. If I'm not emotionally aware of that feeling and I stay in that dung inside motivation, what will happen? I will throw dung. Right? If there's dung inside, dung will come outside. If there is anger and hot, a white hot heat in my heart because I'm so upset, and I don't deal with that, it's going to come out as heat. Am I the only one who has struggled with this, or is there anyone else who can testify that, yeah, this is pretty real, and I'm dealing with that too? This is real, and in this community of faith, we are willing to answer the question, how does God relate to us and help us? And that's what we're trying to answer. And let me just be vulnerable. I remember when I was a kid, okay? I don't know, I was probably like 8 years old, and I have a younger sister. And this is when I started to become aware of these feelings of anger. I caught it one child said, yeah, take someone down, right? Or the responses that we have as human, and in human nature, is to take someone else down, right? To punch someone or hit someone who we're upset with. And so I had no other resources. And so I was really upset at my sister. I'm the older brother. And because I'm the older brother, everything that I say, my sister should follow. Isn't that true? Those of us who are firstborns? Yeah, you're like, yeah, exactly. No. But when I was a child, I thought I was the boss. And she was supposed to listen to what I had to say. And so I remember I was standing on the top of the stairs in the backyard, and I was looking down at my sister. And, I was already in a position of authority. Like, I'm above you, you're below me, listen to me. And I said, Ness, come over here inside the house now. And what'd she say to me? No. Come now. No. Come now. No. I felt like dung. And so you know what I did? This is how I threw dung at her. The first scar on my hand, right here on my right hand, I've never shared this before, came because I was so angry and upset at my sister at 8 or 9 years old. I had no resources to deal with this emotion, that I slammed the glass of my back door, the screen door. And I remember, I can still remember in my mind, it shattered and there was this big hole. And what happened was, I got a scar for the rest of my life. But you know what was worse? My sister was so terrified by my anger at 8 or 9 that she got up and she tried to go inside the house because she was scared, and then she ended up getting cut herself from the glass that I broke. So you see, when we throw dung, we don't only hurt ourselves, but we hurt the other people around us. And friends, I had no emotional resources. At that time, mental health was a taboo subject, right? And even, let's be honest, those of us who are from a Gen X or older generation, even the talk of psychiatry and mental health, that's taboo, right? Like when I personally say that, me as a pastor, one of the best things I've done these last few years is find myself a counselor, a professional Christian counselor that works with Christian leaders. That's one of the best decisions I did for my own emotional mental health, because if I'm not dealing with my dung in a safe space, it's going to come out in unhealthy ways, like it did when I was 8 or 9 years old. And so, if we don't know how to deal with the dung that we already have, we will end up throwing dung. And what Jesus is saying is, look, what you say, the dung that you throw through your words or through your actions, actually is revealing your heart. Because Jesus wants to heal our heart. Can you say it with me? Healing starts with the heart. That's what Jesus is trying to say. It's not on the outside. It is not stop the dung throwing. It is dealing with the dung in our own hearts. Healing starts with the heart. So if I have dung in my heart, I will have dung in my hands. But let me ask you this. What happens, though, if you and I have grace in our hearts? What will we have in our hands, and what will we kindly throw to those who have hurt us? If I have grace in my heart, what will I give to others? I will give grace. And what Jesus is trying to drive home here, friends, the way that we rise above anger is not telling ourselves, all right, rise above anger and control yourself. No, it's actually dealing with the dung in our own hearts, because healing starts with the heart. Turn to your neighbor and say, healing starts in my heart. All right? Some of you are saying that with contempt. Yeah, you need to hear this. No, I'm just teasing. All right? Healing starts in your heart. So let's make this practical. So then how do we actually heal? How do we actually heal the dung in our heart so that we stop throwing dung at other people? Well, Jesus gives us a clue in the rest of the passage. And this is why I believe that Jesus is so relevant for 2025. Man, if only our political pollsters and our journalists and our culture and our universities, both private and public, if only we were to read and not only read but follow the words of Jesus, I think we would be a healthy society. And by the way, can I give you a side note here? God is looking for a group of people who are going to shine their light and to bring flavor of God's love into this world. And guess who that is? Say it with me. Say me. If we are followers of Jesus, He is asking the church, the community of faith, to not just sit in your corner and talk about fancy ideas of the Bible, which is good, but to actually live the Bible out, to live love out in the community and the spaces wherever we interact. At LA Fitness, at work, at Whole Foods, at Jewel Osco, wherever we are. If I am to believe in God, this real God, He has to intersect with my real life. And here at Hinsdale Fil-am Church, our mission is to know God. And as we get to know Him, the knowledge doesn't just stay up here, it's applied so that we actually love as He loves. And could it be that the greatest longing for a church in darkness right now is a group of people, i.e. the church, who are actually living out and demonstrating not only through what they say at church in these four walls, but are actually willing to go out into the community to share the goodness of God and to be models by their behavior and their actions of what calm, collected love and non-anxious presence looks like. I don't know where the Spirit took me there, but I just had to get it off my chest. Thank you, Jesus. So how do we do this? He says, Matthew chapter 5, verse 23, therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar, or let's modernize that, if you're coming to church and you're going to bring your offering of tithe and your presence, hey, before you bring your offering, Jesus says, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled. That means restore that relationship. Ouch. Look, my toes have been stepped on this week as I've been reading this passage this week, studying it. It hurts. He said, Lord, have mercy. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, verse 24, leave your gift there in front of the altar. In other words, don't go even into the sanctuary and leave the offering there and go back home and call that person up or Zoom or FaceTime and do your best quickly before that dung gets even bigger and you start viewing that person as dung and you start throwing 5, 10, 15, 50 pieces of dung at that person. Leave your gift before entering this time of worship, he says, and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. Jesus, what are you saying? He's saying that healing doesn't start by your performance or behavior and doing great things and coming to church. Healing actually starts with your heart. So as fast as you are, Nestor, to drive to church so that you could give your offering, could it be that God's telling me, hey, Nestor, be just as fast of dealing with your own heart and making sure that you're reconciled with that person? Friends, I am guilty as charged. I'll be the first to admit that I am guilty. And then he says this, and it's more of a legal illustration. Verse 25, settle matters quickly with your adversary. Should I wait, 10, 15 years? What does he say here? Do it quickly, right? Who is taking you to court? Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. I truly tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. What is he saying here? Look, there is judgment, there are consequences, and there are temporal and eternal penalties when we hold on to our dung and continue to throw dung at other people. Yes, there are eternal consequences, but there are also consequences right now for the dung that we don't manage well and the dung that we throw at other people. So first he says what you need to do quickly, ASAP, as soon as possible. What you need to do is to reconcile. So what does that look like? What does it look like for me to stop throwing dung and deal with the dung in my own heart? And this is what the Lord gave me. Let me frame it this way. I've shared this before, but I think you're going to find this very helpful and practical because it has helped me tremendously deal with my own impatience and my own anger. I listened to a podcast by Carey Nieuwhof, and he was interviewing a speaker and writer, an author by the name of William Ury. If you don't have this book, I would highly recommend it. It's called Getting to Yes by William Ury. Okay, Getting to Yes by William Ury. And Carey Nieuwhof in his leadership podcast was interviewing William Ury. And he said, William, look, you have brokered negotiations at Camp David. And the latest, the situation between Kim Jong-un and the U.S. and Dennis Rodman of all places, right? The Chicago Bull. He was going to North Korea. Do you guys remember this story? And there was this fighting between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. And for some reason, Dennis Rodman was the appointed person, right, to go there and to help broker peace between North Korea and the United States. And the U.S. intelligence said to William Ury, he said, look, there's a 50% chance that North Korea is going to bomb the U.S. Could you help us out? And so what William did was he hung out with Dennis Rodman, of all places. It was hard for him to hang out and to kind of get to know him. William Ury teaches at Harvard, and he teaches on negotiation. And what he said was brilliant. This was one of the best things I heard last year. He said this. Carey Nieuwhof asked him, William, if you could boil down essentially what your teaching is, all of the books that you've written, all the lectures that you've given into one sentence, what would that be? Well, he said, my friend, when I was hiking with my friend, Jim Collins, who wrote the book Good to Great, he asked me that same question. He said, boil it down to one sentence. I could not define that and I couldn't share that with him. So I went back home and I started to think, all the writings that I have, all the books that I have, all the lectures and experiences, if I could boil it down to the essence of my teaching. And so then he went back on the hike with Jim, and he said, Jim, I got it. If I could boil down all of my teaching, the thousands of words that I've written and I've shared in one sentence, he said this: whenever there is conflict, the problem is me. Whenever there's tension in your home, you're fighting and arguing over kids' toys or whatever. Kids, you're fighting with your friend or your sibling over a toy. Spouses, you feel like your spouse has been treating you like dung. That church member, that friend, oh, don't even get me started. That coworker, oh man. That coworker, whenever there's conflict, the problem is who? Can you say it with me? The problem is me. That's the problem. Now, I'm not saying that we should tolerate abuse or from people either physically or spiritually and verbally. And by the way, I did say spiritually because it is very possible in church spaces for us to spiritually abuse people by taking this beautiful and amazing book of God's grace and using it as a hammer to make sure that people are following God. Friends, that's not what Jesus was like. He would invite people to encounter his beauty. Whenever there's a conflict and a problem, the problem is me. What would have happened if I would have known that at 8 years old? This is what it would have looked like. Ness, come up here. Right? And the more I called out my sister and commanded her, the more who became the villain in that scenario, Nestor or my sister? The more I call someone out and throw dung at someone, the more I make them the villain, and what happens to me? I become the victim. They call this in mental health spaces victimization or victim mentality. And so the right politically are throwing dung bombs at the left. And what happens? They paint them as the villain, then they become a victim. And as a victim, you'll do whatever it takes to take that person down. And the right does the same thing to the left. And everyone's doing it politically, religiously, and it's happening even in our own family, extended family networks, and even in our own homes. Whenever there is a conflict, the problem is me. And if I could tell myself at 8 years old when I scarred my arm by throwing dung at my sister, by hitting that glass, I would have said, Nestor, the problem is not your sister. The problem is you. And what happens is, if I start saying that the problem is me, I no longer am trying to point the finger and call the other person the villain. If it is me, then who's the villain? I'm the villain. And if I'm the villain, then I can take extreme ownership of my life and realize that though might have been shaped through my personality and through my family of origin. And friends, these behaviors that we manifest through our anger, through our words and our actions, I'm guilty, they are not just within our psyche, they are also socially conditioned through your family of origin back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 generations, all the way back to Adam and Eve. Because even in the second generation of mankind, Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve's kids, there was some dung throwing. And Abel killed Cain. Right there, the second generation of the human race. And these actions are socially conditioned, and we have to be aware of these actions. And I believe that if healing starts with my heart, that what I need to do is stop calling other people the villain and realize that I am the villain. The problem in any conflict is who? It's me. So what does it look like applied? In a district outside of here, I was pastoring in another state. And there was an elder that definitely, y'all, I can understand why Jesus had a hard time with his disciples, especially like Peter. You work with people like Peter who just know everything. Oh, it's hard. It's hard. And I know everything too, right? You get someone who knows everything with someone else who knows everything, and it's just not a match made in heaven, right? So I had this conflict, okay? There wasn't, dung throwing, but there was definitely some dung, and there was resistance. And so here's what I learned in that experience, okay? I remember meeting at a restaurant with this individual, sitting down with him. And we had a conversation, and then he pulled something out of his pocket. Thankfully, it wasn't a weapon. It was a letter. And he wrote this memo out because he said, I'm not really good with words, but I want to share exactly what I feel in my heart. And sometimes, if you have some really deep conflict and tension and anger, sometimes it's better to just write it out word for word and read it to the other individual so that you're not getting emotional. Because it's so hard when you're facing and sharing from your heart that dung will come out in your statement, right? So just better to write it out. So he wrote it out. And I was trying to defend my position. No, this is the way that we need to go in terms of our sermon series. But he said, no, I would like this. I would like this, right? But the problem, I thought the problem is him because I have a vision of where we should go with our sermon series. And so I kept throwing dung at him. I didn't deal with my own dung. And I realized in that conversation as I listened, can you say the word listen? As I listened, remember, the problem is not the other, the problem is me. And if the problem is me, then that means that I have to do my best to understand, to seek first to understand, and then to be understood. So as I was sitting there, look, I wanted to throw that dung and hold on to my dung and my position. But something came upon me. Spirit of God, Spirit of grace. And I decided to not just hear, but to actually listen to his heart. And I realized that this man, Bob, it's a fake name. This man, Bob, just wanted to be heard, and he wanted to feel valued. And what I learned from that experience? What I learned from that experience is that the more I come into a conflict with anger and my own dung, and I realize that the problem is the other person, nothing is going to get resolved. But I believe that God is raising up salt and light of the earth. You and I, we who sit here in this beautiful community of faith, to rise above anger and know that healing starts with whose heart? The other person or me? Healing starts with my heart. And the way that I begin that healing process is to recognize that I am the problem, that I need the healing. I need the healing, not the other person, me first. I need that healing. This is the practical tip that I want to give you, friends, for your practice. It is practicing the belief to take full ownership, not of everything, but of what you can control. I can't control how other people treat me, but what I can control is my response to how other people treat me. Anger is not a problem. It is what I do with that anger. It is when I throw dung at other people that becomes a problem. And so how do we deal with this? How do we deal with this? Because the reality is, there's no way in this world where Nestor I cannot heal my own heart. Where can I get that healing if healing truly starts with my heart? Where can I get that healing once I start recognizing that I am the problem, that I have my stuff that I have to deal with, that I have stuff that I've picked up from my family of origin that no other place wants to talk about, but here in this church community, we will talk about that because all of this stuff that we have experienced in our family of origin has shaped who we are today. And I don't know about you, but I refuse to perpetuate dung throwing in this world. I have been called by God as a follower of Jesus, of the beautiful, loving gospel. I'm called by Him to not be a dung thrower, but to allow Him to heal my dung in my own heart so that I don't offer dung to other people, but I offer grace. How do we experience that grace? One more verse and then we are done. The Bible says here, Matthew chapter 5, Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shall not murder,' and anyone who murders will be subject to what? Will be subject to judgment." Question for you. Was Jesus subject to judgment? What was the judgment that Jesus bore and took for us on our behalf? What was that judgment? Jesus, by the way, did He ever murder anyone? Did Jesus ever murder anyone? So you're telling me that the one who never sinned and never threw dung, the one who on the cross, when He could have thrown dung, He said, "Father, forgive my victims. Forgive the ones who are a victim, enslaved by the traditions of the enemy, by dung throwing, by killing me. Forgive them, for they don't even know what they are doing." If Jesus Himself, who knew no sin, died a murderer's death, what does it say about Jesus' character? And what does it say, friend, about how much He loves you? Jesus took all of the dung that you threw at your spouse and your children and your coworker and your extended family and your friends and your neighbor and your political enemy and your religious enemy. All of that dung that you threw actually landed on Jesus on the cross. And because Jesus paid the price for the dung that you and I have thrown, once we enter a relationship with Him, then our hearts can heal. Once we get to know Him, once we get to know that in His heart of hearts, He doesn't have dung, but He has grace. Once I experience that grace and realize that I can't do this on my own, but I have to fully, 100% depend on Jesus, who is all about grace and died for my own dung. It is by depending and trusting in Jesus, then I can deal with my own dung so that I could hand out grace to the ones who have thrown dung in my face. I know it's graphic with that image, but that is exactly what you and I have experienced this past week. And the good news is that there is one who wipes away that dung. His name is Jesus. 1 John chapter 1, verse 9, I call that the 911 text, 1 John 1:9 backwards. If we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. So Lord, Jesus, take my dung and wash it clean like the Niagara Falls. Wash me clean of my dung and the anger and the brokenness in my own heart and the murderous ideas that I have in my heart against my enemies. Thank you, Jesus. Is there someone here who wants that grace? Look, we have a Connect card. We'll put it on the screen. There's a Connect card in the pew in front of you. Let us know as a pastoral team, I would like to begin a relationship with Jesus. If you are saying, hey, I would like to begin a relationship with Jesus, I hope we have that QR code that we could put up on there on the screen, the Connect card. It is, there's a Connect card, QR code and a website where you can click and say, hey, I'd like to begin a relationship with Jesus. Or let's say you're thinking, I want to have a new start and to leave my dung behind so I can come up out of the waters of baptism. You're thinking about baptism. On November 22, we're going to have a special baptismal celebration. You can be part of that. Let us know as a pastoral team. And last but not least, we'll put this Grow Group catalog up as our praise team comes out to sing. Our Grow Group catalog we launched a few weeks ago. Friends, we are a community that wants to help you become the best version that God created you to be. And what we realize is that this corporate gathering is one small piece of that component, but the way that you and I learn isn't through small groups. And so this season, we have gone into 12 weeks of Grow Groups, 13 options. If you'd like to be part of this group, one of these groups, let us know. You have the catalog. I would encourage you. You cannot grow alone. I promise you. There's no way that you can grow alone. Our parenting group is growing, and we're trying to find another place we open it up again because there was some interest. So let us know as a pastoral team. Join a Grow Group and let us know. Let's sing. Let's stand together. Let us stand together and give glory to this God who heals us from our sin.